It's time for Cutting Edge Consciousness with Freeman Michaels and Barnett Bain. Thought-provoking discussions and bold ideas from the edge of possibility.
Welcome to Cutting Edge Consciousness. Freeman Michaels here.
With Barnett Bain. Good moment, everyone.
Good moment.
How are you, Freeman?
Business as usual.
Business as usual. You are smooth. Nice segue. We didn't even get started and you're segueing. Is it? Do we wrapping this up? We'll see you next week.
Let's go.
Business as usual. You know, speaking of business.
That's what I was trying to do.
Funny you should mention that. I was at an event not long ago, and I met a guy named Bob Chapman. And we'll have Bob on at some point. I should make a note of that. And Bob Chapman talks about leadership as a service opportunity. He runs a quite a big business. It's a big business that is coalesced. It's a number, and he's aggregated a number of small businesses, and together they make quite an enormous business. But he operates very, very differently. He has created a culture where people are valued for who they are. They're seen, they're heard, they're acknowledged. And he told this beautiful story about attending I think it was his daughter's wedding. And he was very, very moved because this was he wanted people to. He was fully appreciative that this was his child who was moving on, and he became aware. He had this gestalt moment that all these folks that worked in his various companies, they were all somebody's precious child.
Ah, that's beautiful.
And it was a sea change. It was a seminal moment for him.
That's such a phenomenal story. The humanizing of business, because it can be so dehumanizing, and the sort of core essentials that make business worth doing. I mean, business is an exchange of energy, right? And if it's done well, all boats rise. You know, the word currency, you know, really directly like a current, a flow of good and service, a reciprocation where an exchange of value. There's some core principles in the business of the doing business, as it were, that are so critical. And I'm concerned that much of our current business climate has done the opposite. People feel objectified. They don't feel seen and heard and cared about. Business is such an opportunity to build community and such an opportunity for creative expression, and just so often it isn't, right?
Well, it's an evolving area, as everything else on planet Earth is moving from what was to what can be.
That's right.
Business likewise. And since business is one of, if not the most, the primary area of creativity, certainly in this country today, in my opinion,
I agree with you.
It's no surprise that it is at the forefront of reassessing its role and what it can be. So we are really delighted to have with us today my friend Doug Rauch. Doug is the CEO of Conscious Capitalism. He spent 31 years with Trader Joe's, the last 14 years as president. And he is, as I said, the CEO of Conscious Capitalism. And we will talk a little bit about that organization. Doug, welcome to Cutting Edge Consciousness.
Thanks, Barnett and Freeman. It's great to be here.
So we're talking about, I was in a sort of remorse is, I don't know if that's the right word. We've used that word a little bit. I don't know if that's exactly right, but I was reflecting on concerns about sort of what's wrong with business. But I guess what might be more constructive,
what's right,
especially with you on the show, is to talk about what's right with business.
Yeah.
Because I look at Trader Joe's, a place I love to go hang out at, you know, and I think about other stores that I'm not so enthusiastic about walking in the doors of. And there's something really palpable in the values and in the value that I receive going in those doors, which you're in a significant part of creating. So you're such an appropriate guest to have on this show about this topic.
Well, thank you. Yeah, and I love two words that you used there, which, is not just value, but values. And I think that, more and more shoppers, customers, particularly millennials, are demanding that the businesses they engage in represent their values, not just provide them a value. And that context is every bit as important as content. And I think that's something that is a little bit of a sea shift over the last 15, 20 years. And I would also say that to some degree, the internet, social media, and all of that are helping that, because transparency is so easy now that almost anything that's said or done anywhere truly can become spread throughout the world in a heartbeat. So you have to make sure you're walking your walk, that you're talking your talk, and that you are connecting authentically. So to me, what I would say about great companies is they have congruence, that they no longer can get away with it nearly as easy as it used to be with saying one thing and doing another. They're called out, on Glassdoor by their own employees. They're called out by customers on Yelp with crowdsourced reviews. They're called out in various ways. And they're called out not just for things that are going wrong, they're called out for things that are going right.
Yeah.
When people find things that they love, they find people that resonate and that have congruence and share their values, well, it spreads like wildfire. And, you take a business like Zappos, for instance, and Tony Hsieh and what they've done. And, here's a company that, if you were to describe it, you'd almost say you were talking about a bumblebee, that in theory couldn't fly, right? It's too heavy. It's like you're going to be a shoe company that's only going to be over the internet, and you're going to give phenomenal customer service. It's like, how are you going to do that? I mean, shoe company giving customer service over the internet, and yet they have created a relationship with customers and a standard of excellence that has, driven them to, become quite a dominant player. And I think that a lot of it comes out of the congruence that is throughout that organization regarding the importance they have of outstanding customer service and then delivering happiness, as they say, which I really love. I love that concept.
So from the perspective of someone who has who's been at the helm of a quite large business, what are the kinds of challenges that folks face steering large organizations and seeking to inculcate in them a culture of character, one where the values are consistent through the organization and begin to drift more towards what can be given than what can be gotten, and how can one uplift and care for and inspire others? What are the challenges that one faces in introducing that kind of culture?
Yeah, well, there are a lot of challenges to it. First, I'd say that if you don't have a good sense of your purpose, your true purpose, you're in trouble. Because
you're talking individually now. You're talking as
I'm talking about as a corporation,
as an organization.
That if the organization doesn't have a clear mission, a clear purpose, that resonates down through all the employees, that's easy to understand and inspires and people, and it's more than just making money. I like to say that profit. Let's face it, profit is the air that every corporation breathes. Without it, you're dead, right?
Yeah.
And so the problem is that we have, in many instances, come to think that the reason we exist is for air, and that it'd be like an individual waking up in the morning and saying, today I'm going to get as much air as I can possibly get. That's why I live. I exist to get air, because I can go quite a while without food, and I can go a couple of days without water. I can't go, more than a few minutes without air. So obviously, I must exist to get air.
And now I've objectified myself because I've separated myself from my own, and then I am prone to objectify others, and now we're in the soup.
And also, then it becomes just a story of me.
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't really care how much air you get. It's about how much air I get, right? And to some degree, there's only enough air, then I'm, we're competing for air. So I think that, one of the first things about really good businesses, about conscious business, is they start with a purpose that recognizes that it's about creating value, lasting value for a customer.
Mm-hmm.
And, Drucker, whom I had the pleasure of studying with, said that, the only valid definition of a true business purpose is to create and keep a customer.
It's relational versus transactional. It's about building community. It's about exchanging value. Yeah,
exactly.
In a reciprocal way. And the word reciprocal, really, the heart of it is balance and harmony. That's the energetic nature of reciprocal. It isn't keeping score. It isn't mine and yours. It's just really trying to organize back to balance and harmony.
That's right. And so to me, I think you start with, the obstacles that every organization faces is, if you got a clear sense of your purpose. If not, you should get one. It's kind of one of those, if you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there.
Mm-hmm.
Or to get a little older, you can say, Socrates said that, the unexamined life isn't worth living.
Mm-hmm.
Some would say the unlived life isn't worth examining. But I think that in this case, that business, you have to start with that sense of why do we exist as a business.
Mm-hmm.
And it should be something inspiring and profound. It should be in the sense that it's about generating value. Even if it's just you're a local cleaner or a company that makes widgets, that's okay. It's providing a value to society. It's a service, and you're engaging in it with volunteer exchange, and you're creating jobs, you're creating this and that. So I think that there's a sense of purpose. The other one that's really critical, I think, too, and you started to talk about this, and I love the idea of this idea of balance, which is that good businesses, really conscious businesses, understand that they exist to create value throughout their stakeholder chain. That is not concentrated on their shareholders. It's not about maximizing shareholder return. That's an incredibly destructive concept. It's about, instead, optimizing value along a chain of your, yes, of course your shareholders have got to get a fair return, but it's about also your customers, your employees, the community you're in, the environment, that all of these stakeholders, you have to think about it from a standpoint of a long-term relationship. So one of the things that you, again, mentioned in the beginning was, that we're getting into this sort of short-term, quick, sort of thinking, instant gratification stuff, and quarterly reports, et cetera. So I think one of the challenges for a large organization to really stay on purpose is to not get swayed, not get kind of hypnotized into short-termism, decisions that pump up a stock price for the moment or bring you a quick return, but perhaps damage the relationship with either your employees, your customers, or even the environment over the longer run. And the only way I could, in a way, the analogy for me is that if you're in a relationship with someone, and if what you're doing is only about short-term interest, and they're your short-term interest all the time, I would refer to that as the definition of an unhealthy relationship.
Yeah.
That healthy relationships are where both people's needs are being met. Both people voluntarily feel that they're getting more out of the relationship than if they didn't have it, et cetera. And I think that, when business approaches things that way, you get all sorts of amazing synergies that occur.
Yeah, it's powerful. I want to take this in a particular direction, and this harkens back to, Barnett, you're going to remember this. I had a moment in my own experience, come out of a business background, won't go into details, but I had a moment where I saw an aspect of myself, I call it clever boy, where I was being clever, but I had lost track of values. I was so enamored with my own cleverness that I didn't see where my behavior was destructive, and it wasn't pretty to look at. What I love specifically about Trader Joe's, frankly, is there are no sales. I trust Trader Joe's to give me a good price. The pricing is right, and I just go in there and I feel so grateful. I can shop for what I want and buy what I want, and I'm not paying attention to, do I have to buy 3 versions of this to get the deal? Is this 2-ounce package. Is this the one that sale marker is under? Because if it's not, then it's really not a fair price. So all of this clever boy stuff that I find so repulsive, because energetically it snaps me into this competition. I'm competing with the store I'm in, right? Which I don't feel at Trader Joe's. That's one piece I love about Trader Joe's. The other second piece I love about Trader Joe's is how quick Trader Joe's is to take responsibility. If they'll pull something off the shelf quick, if there's a question mark about it, they'll put up a sign and say, if you have this, bring it back. They're so quick to own and comp to. And I wonder, here's my question in all of this. What's going on behind the scenes? Because this is really about accountability and, again, responsibility and a sense of values. What's going on behind the scenes? Because that's got to be congruent. That's not something you do one day and the next day you play it different. What's going on? Because
well, I would say, quite honestly, it all started with the founder, Joe Colomb, Trader Joe. And I had the pleasure of working with him for, how long? 11, 12 years. And then he left the company in 89. But Joe set this up originally with what he called treating your customer with respect. That, in other words, you treat them as an adult. You don't try to trick them. You don't try to pull one over. You treat them with respect. That if they know what you know, and they don't want to buy it, then you shouldn't be selling it. Let's not trick them. Let's not. Hey, thousands of prices lowered every week. Meanwhile, thousands were raised, right, to cover that. It's like that's a gimmick, and that he really set up the tone and the culture that was around. Let's create a company that delivers a fair value, an honest everyday price. That we are, and the culture that one set up that says this company exists so that its buyers are the purchasing agents for the customers. They're all the way down, flowing through the whole company as an integrity design that is around delivering value to the customer, and using then their suppliers and their vendors as trusted partners in delivering that value. So instead of trying to squeeze and cheat their partners, they look at them as, valued associates who are, without whom they obviously wouldn't have product, to whom they can partner in delivering that value.
That is brilliant.
It's really about not trying to outsmart, wit, or as you say, clever your customer, because that, in the end of the day, is a very short-term relationship. The customers figure it out.
Okay, well, it breeds resentment. But the language. We need to take a quick break. But before we go to break, I just want to say it back. The buyers are the purchasing agent for the customer. That is such a different orientation. That Trader Joe's employee, that organization are my purchasing agent, and they have great relationships to bring me products that I can rely on at a price that's fair. That is such for me, that is such a critical distinction. That is such a different orientation.
We're going to step in for a second, and we're going to allow some of our very fine sponsors to
our purchasing agents.
Our purchasing agents, exactly, to be stewards for you listeners. And after this break, we will be right back with Doug.
Welcome back to Cutting Edge Consciousness, thought-provoking discussions and bold ideas from the edge of possibility.
Thanks for staying with us. We're back. This is Barnett. I'm here with Freeman and our guest, Doug Rauch. So before the break, we were headed off in a direction. All these directions are fascinating to me, so I'm going to pull a thread. Mm-hmm. One of the tenets of Conscious Capitalism, our guest is the CEO of Conscious Capitalism, is to make people your purpose, and that is it's not so much I guess it's a subversive idea, and that's the good news. That is the good news.
A good kind of subversive idea.
Once upon a time, Doug, you told me a story about a checkout person who worked in at one of your stores when you were the CEO of Trader Joe's. It was a story, and it had something to do with a customer who forgot her credit card or her identification. You remember that story?
Yeah, well, first of all, let me just correct you. I was president.
President.
I don't need any posthumous promotion. So just to be clear.
Okay.
But, yeah, what happened, and this is really critical, that the companies that generate genuine purpose of customer care, so it's not just lip service, but they actually create cultures and reward and share and celebrate this. And there are many companies that do that, by the way, of which I think Trader Joe's is one of the great ones. That they have amazing stories, and these are the stories that I call orbital velocity, because what it shows is that that you no longer need massive amounts of thrust by leadership or management to like drive it home to the employees. They get it, and it's like now it's orbital velocity. It's just it's taken off on its own, and things happen you would never predict. So one of the things that happened when this culture of let's really take care of the customer, let's really make sure they have the best possible experience they can, was when a customer that had forgotten their wallet. There was a lady that had several young children, and it was right before a snowstorm in New York, and they were shopping in one of the stores up in Westchester County, and came in, did this big, massive shop, because if you know anything about being back east, before there was a blizzard or nor'easter, as they call them, people go into the stores and they just buy like there's no end. And so she brought this massive cart up, and groceries are all bagged, it's shopped, and then it says, "Okay, ma'am, here's your total." And she can't find her purse. She realizes, "Oh my God, I left my wallet on the kitchen counter at home." She's stunned. She's embarrassed. She tells the cashier, "I don't know what to say. I forgot my wallet." And this is what Trader Joe's would call at the time a part-time employee. That's a phrase that's gone away because it also kind of it has some pejoratives with it if you're not careful, which were never intended. But this is someone who worked, part-time with the company. But they took a look at the person and said, "You know what? Don't worry about it. Today I'll buy your groceries." And pulls out of his back pocket his wallet and his debit card, swipes, and says, "Next time you're in, just pay me back." And
Wow.
so he didn't do the typical thing, which is like, "Oh my God, I can't believe this!" Like, really, lady? Like, there's a long line behind her. There's all these people in line. He didn't embarrass her. No one in line even knew what had happened. He didn't ring bells and call management over like, "Oh, I got this problem. What do you think you can do?" And then the manager had to take care of it. Meanwhile, the people in line are going, "Oh, I got in the wrong line. What's going on here?" It's about to snow outside, and I'm behind some lady who's taking forever. So what happened was but she then drove home, got her wallet, came back, paid him back right away, tried to give him a tip. He said, "No, I don't need a tip." He said, "Well, I want to make sure you get credit." He said, "Well, tell my manager." And so he went and told him, and said, "I really make sure you give me." He said, "Well, if you really believe that, here's the number of the president. Give him a call." So I get this phone call from this lady, and so when I talk to this person, this cashier, like, wow, first of all, you knocked her socks off. This is amazing. She swears she'll tell everybody she knows, and undying love for this company, because what it really showed was that I trust you as a human being. And he said, how we talk about that rule of integrity and our values about treat people the way you want to be treated. So I thought, what went through my mind real quickly, this is the cashier, was what would I want? If this was me in line and I forgot my wallet and I got these kids that are kind of crying and my stuff's all bagged up and it's about to snow, what would I want? And he said, "You know what I'd want more than anything? I want someone to trust me and know I will pay you back. Just trust me this time. I will pay you back." And so there are a number of instances like that at Trader Joe's. There's things that happen at Trader Joe's, things happen at Container Store and Panera and other companies that really do these things where people go out of their way to really make sure that the customer's having a really fine experience. And I do think that Trader Joe's does a phenomenal job, and they're well known for that. But I think it's something that no matter what business you're in, that when you lead with trust, when you lead with care, when you're treating people literally the way you would want to be treated, then I think magic can happen.
Yes, absolutely. It inspires everyone. It creates a culture, and it uplifts, it elevates, and it shifts the quality of the experience right across the board. Everybody comes away experiencing more of who they really are. So it is a magical, it is an alchemical process, and it's
and we hunger for that. I do think that business nowadays is if you go back 150, 200 years when we weren't quite such a secular society, that we first of all had town hall meetings in almost every little town, and we had patience for going and listening to people talk for an hour and a half, whether it's the Lincoln-Douglas debates all across the country or whatever it was. We also looked to our civic organizations. There was a lot of stickiness to people feeling they belonged to that town or that city, and they were engaged in civic organizations or religious through their church. And more in the last century, those points of feeling of belonging have broken down, and in society. And that what we find for many people, and certainly what I believe, is that a business, particularly retail, but just business in general, done properly, done in a truly conscious way, where you're treating people with as a truly human organization, you have that ability to create real cathedrals of meaning, real citadels of meaning for people in their work, where they get to bring their best. It's not just an economic transaction. They get to bring their best, their creativity, their values, everything else. They don't have to take an ethical bath when they leave work, and they can't compartmentalize. I got my social values. And then I've got my my work values. I think that gone is business realized there's got to be congruency here. That I can't have two different sets of ethics here. So
yes, it's a sea. This is a sea change. I mean, this is one of the reasons that we call what we do here on this show kitchen table conversations. It's a recognition of precisely what you're speaking about. Is that we no longer have a campfire, so we don't have a unifying force that pulls together an organic sense of community, wherein we can all see our values reflected in each other. And we can, there's such power in the telling where we can lift each other, we can care for each other, and we can create a sense of meaning and connection. That business has latched onto this as a vision, a vision and a revision of what itself and what it has the opportunity to do, the impact that it has to have, as opposed to being driven entirely by market forces and using its people as objectifying them and using them as cogs in a wheel. This this could change. This has the potential to change things systemically.
This new consciousness.
This new consciousness is a
Well, interesting. The new is actually the interesting word, because it's not new. It's fundamental. I mean, what we're going back to is, why do we do business?
It's monumental. It is a monumental change, and we are at the beginning of something here. That is, the time has clearly come for this, when companies like the Container Store and like Trader Joe's and Whole Foods and Patagonia and many others, for whom this is the lifeblood and the raison d'etre of the organization.
I want to go back, though, because what I was just saying is it is new. It is new in its iteration, but it is fundamental. We do business. Again, we go back to the word currency, an exchange of good and service. That business provides resources, service, value, and there's an exchange, a reciprocation. And so business is a noble thing in this context, where it's gone to being a competitive, manipulative sort of expression of our shadow is not so helpful.
It's developmental.
It is developmental. I agree with you that this is a wave, though, of recognizing that there's a core purpose behind doing business, and this objectifying distorts and erodes that.
So how do you feel about the future in the short term? I know the long-term vision is fairly tucked in. It's not a stretch. But in the short term, how do you feel about the future, Doug, for business?
Well, I mean, frankly, I'm very encouraged, quite frankly, by the amount of awareness, the number of organizations that are embracing a deep sense of purpose, that are embracing, workplaces that they want to bring, make more human. That millennials are what I call practical idealists. They are hungry for doing good, but they also want to do well while they're doing it, and recognizing that there are opportunities out in the world where you can do both. That it's not a trade-off. That's one of the myths, is that you got to do this trade-off. If you can either do well for yourself personally, or you can do good to the world. And I don't think that's true. And I think there's plenty of examples. It's kind of like the black swan theory. You only need one to then show that not all swans are white. And I think that once you start to realize, gee whiz, there are a number of people out there that are creating real value to society, real value. They're really elevating humanity, through goods and services and breakthroughs in technologies and understanding and everything else. And they're also doing well. And I think that so I'm very optimistic and bullish on the possibilities. And I do think that we've come around again in a way, as Freeman's saying, to something fundamental about relationships and relational business. But I think we do it with a different level of consciousness and awareness of kind of that the world is now interconnected and interdependent in a way that we didn't understand in the past.
This is huge.
So we've come to the same spot, but a different, but almost like a spiral. We're up at a different level now. Yeah. We realize, gee, we can't just chop down all the forests to spread west, as a young nation. That the environment does matter. The oceans, which once seemed infinite, actually, can be polluted. The same with the air, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that this interdependence and this interconnectedness that we're experiencing, like it or not, all throughout the world. Almost anything happens, and in 2 minutes, something of magnitude happens. In 2 minutes, everybody in the world knows it, it seems. And so I think that this brings us together in a way and provides opportunities for us to recognize the real nature of the way things are, and then have business reflect that.
Sustainability is a growth industry. Sustainability, that's the next wave of growth in our culture, at least from the perspective of Mr. Doherty, who we had on talking about grand strategy. So I wanted to throw that in, which I think is really true. Something you said about millennials I think is really important, and it tracks back to, Barnett, I think you were talking about sort of a mechanized view, cogs in a wheel. This is, for me, a shift in consciousness. We went at looking at the world from a Newtonian, Darwinian, Cartesian mindset where everything's mechanized and everything's compartmentalized. And I see a pushback with millennials. They don't want to go to work for corporations and take on job titles, job descriptions. This is most elegantly illustrated, I think, with Google, who, from what I understand, they don't hire for position, they hire talent, and then they try to self-organize people within their community, their culture, into roles and responsibilities versus Barnett likes to say shoehorning someone in this very small compartment. Okay, you're going to be the this, and this is what you're going to do, which I think for most millennials feels like, I don't want to do that. And this, again, I think is a mindset shift. We're coming out of the industrial age. We're not that anymore. We're not going to be doing that again. We're into this creative age where people don't want to be mechanized and compartmentalized. And what Barnett was saying earlier, it's developmental. That the dawning of the new age, and I'd love you to weigh in on this, needs to treat people different. It needs to be more creative, more innovative, not held so tightly in this mechanized mindset. Does that make sense?
Well, I certainly think, let me just say, I think that it's up for each of us to have the new age dawn in our own hearts and minds. And that I think that what does make sense to me is that we are understanding the ways of the past aren't working well for all of us here. And that we are, quickly, if we're not careful, headed down a road that if China and India emulate, our particular patterns of treating the earth, et cetera, we're going to all have trouble. If they imitate our diet, we're going to have trouble. So I think that we're all starting to learn that, okay, in this new awareness, we need to change to set examples for how others can change too. I think it starts with us. It starts with good businesses. It starts with, being aware of the wake that you create. Like a boat. That you got to be aware that that we have impact as a country, as businesses, as individuals. And I think that good business, is really around creating long and short-term value. It's around creating a story of us, not just a story of me. And it's around recognizing our, fundamental need as individuals to create, to express, to be valued, to be trusted and cared for, while, engaging in things that challenge and push us, which, I think business many times gives us the opportunity to do.
It certainly gives us the opportunity to make, as I said earlier, systemic change very, very quickly. And I am very inspired at how much leadership there is in the business world, and how it is operating from the inside out, how these businesses are becoming expressions of what is beautiful and true in the hearts of the leadership, and that how quickly it pervades organizations, and how quickly the world is changing. This organization of which you are CEO, Conscious Capitalism, would you say a little bit for our listeners about that?
Yeah, I'll just make it very brief, which is this is a nonprofit organization that really exists to help change the way the business is done and the narrative about business, the narrative about good business. And that it is an organization that is made up of many of the companies that you've mentioned already today. And it is around events and programs and articles. It's around business leaders and thought leaders and academics. It's around more or less all the ways in which we engage in business, touching that and thinking about that as a more evolved way to express our humanness, and to do it in such a way that at the end of the day, conscious capitalism, when all said and done, exists to support elevating humanity. Because we believe that when you step back and look over the last 200, 300 years, that business properly executed is the most powerful system for social cooperation and human progress that's ever conceived, economically, right? It just rightly structured capitalism is a phenomenal, powerful system. When it's now coupled with what I'll call the consciousness of our interdependence, of our being truly human, and our interconnectedness, then I think we really have a chance to really soar. And conscious capitalism exists to broaden and deepen that experience.
Awesome.
Well, it has been a real pleasure and an honor to have you with us here on Cutting Edge Consciousness today. And
Absolutely.
I want to just extend to you my personal invitation to join us again when you are in the Los Angeles area. If you'll give me a heads up, we'll see if we can book you in live in studio. It would be such a pleasure to have you back. And I look forward to seeing you again real soon, Doug.
Well, thank you much. Freeman, good to speak with you. Good to meet with you.
It was amazing. I'm really thrilled. It touches me on every level. The work you're doing, so important. Thanks for spending time with us today.
It's been a real pleasure and an honor. Thank you, gentlemen.
And for those of you listening, we invite you to stay tuned, because Barnett and I will be back after these messages to wrap things up here on Cutting Edge Consciousness.
Welcome back to Cutting Edge Consciousness, thought-provoking discussions and bold ideas from the edge of possibility.
And welcome back to Cutting Edge Consciousness. Freeman Michaels here with Barnett Bain.
Yeah, great to have Doug on the show with us. So much grist for the mill, so much
so
great
exciting.
Food for thought.
It's so exciting.
You're not going to get food for the thought from the
Trader
guy
Joe's
who ran from Trader Joe. I mean, you're not going to get food.
That's right. Well, I just love that the idea that what was it? That the buyers are the purchasing agents for the customer. That's such a different orientation than, we're going to create this business and we'll go get our customers. We'll have a market and It's a whole different leading with service.
It is so much more about what am I going to give than what am I going to get, and where are we going more so than where have we been, and how does my personal view. But it requires becoming, as Doug said at the outset, it really does require paying some attention and creating a sense of vision, of purpose. At least any vision to get started. And of course, vision is something that, as we mature, it has to mature and be revised and be revisited and be revisioned and envisioned. But then we now have a set of values, and the business or the organization or the family or the creative enterprise, whatever it is, becomes a vehicle that is not only about generating a bottom line or an artifact, but is also in the delivery of that vehicle to express a vision, connection, community, values, uplift, care.
It's awesome.
And this is clearly what is happening in so many of the more outstanding performers in business. They are, what makes them outstanding, many things that make them outstanding, but there is that consciousness underneath that,
I think the
that
word's
rises
maturity.
to the top.
I
It
think
is a
what
maturity.
you're saying is,
You're right.
you kept saying the word mature, and I kept going, yeah.
It's maturity.
What conscious capitalism is, it's a maturity. It's a kind of growing up. You know, one of the things, and you've said this to me a couple times, and it's really valuable, is I have a tendency to rail against something that's developmental versus just see it as a developmental stage, right? Instead of making it wrong, which really doesn't serve anybody, it's how do we just recognize it? And again, it goes back to a conversation you and I had about our own sort of adolescent wanting and fantasizing, right? There's these things, the adolescent me, get the girl, win the prize, you know, be the hero.
Have the good hair.
Have the good hair. Well, I do have the good hair.
still
but
have the good hair.
That's okay. But I'm not so identified with my hair. It just happens to be what, you know, comes along. The maturing. And so when I see reflected back to me my own immaturity, my own, and I see it so often when I hear people railing against the corporation. Look, I'm not dismissing that there's bad behavior on the part of corporations. That's fine. I get it. There's some of that stuff really going on. But there's also good behavior. And I'd rather organize towards the good behavior and what's possible, you know, and what we're talking about here versus just keep, you know, because when I get all, you know, what's the word? I get all
Bent out of shape.
Yeah, bent out of shape. It's like I'm then at that level. Then I'm battling. It's like me screaming.
Us, them.
It's like me screaming at my 4-year-old. If my 4-year-old's acting out, you know, someone needs to be the adult here. I can't meet the 4-year-old at the level of consciousness that they're coming from.
Doug said something that is so pertinent to that point, because so often there are organizations, or there are conferences, or there are people convene with high motives in their hearts, and they seek to uplift and to foster change, and then they want to distill it down to a set of actionables and principles, and it doesn't allow, as Doug said, for everyone to open their hearts and open their minds in their own cadence and in their own timing. And so you can't really legislate these things.
Yeah.
And you can't scold
No.
people, and you can't scold your 4-year-old into becoming a 5-year-old, and your 3rd grader into becoming a 4th grader. And you can't scold anybody into firing on more cylinders. I'm operating as best as I can right now, and I'm loving and I'm growing and in my own cadence. And thank goodness there are those who inspire me and support me and teach me, who are patient and compassionate enough to wait at the edge of how I show up, and create a model for what is more. And so this organization, Conscious Capitalism, is very, very much about creating that kind of an environment that allows people and organizations and cultures and companies to begin to grow and make changes and to mature. You grow in that way as well, in their own cadence and in their own way.
I love it.
It's a key distinction. You
It's a
look for
key
what
distinction.
is working, not for what is not working.
No, that's right. It's hard because I mean, there's a piece here of recognizing what's not working, but not getting all bent out of shape about it. You know, not getting all righteous and again, that just comes out as a scold. Which is not constructive and really doesn't ever get received because the developmental stage.
People retrench. They go into their bunkers when they're scolded.
Yeah, it's like when my teenage aspect is rearing its head. We don't want to scold that aspect because we know the reaction we're going to get. Doors slam, right?
And you go through tires faster.
Things get broken.
You go through your tires a lot faster than your brake linings.
Yeah. So, look, the idea that there's an alternative that people can step into that feels, inclusive. So it isn't like you have to, do something to get in the club. Everyone's invited, because it's a broad enough and generous enough, forgive me for using that word, offer, both words, that folks feel like they can participate. They feel included. So that's the game. And I get excited about it. I love business. I mean, I love the, leadership as service, which you brought up in the beginning. I love what I brought up because I brought it up. No, that's not true. The sustainability as a growth industry, which harkens back to the Grand Strategy Show, which I thought was brilliant. There's a lot of exciting stuff when we look at business this way. It's a beautiful mechanism. As you said, it may be the greatest creative outlet in this country is business and entrepreneurialism.
It may well be. I'm very excited by what I see going on there. And I'm also very excited, as I said earlier, about how quickly, when business makes shifts, how quickly that becomes shows up systemically, right, throughout. We only have to look at IBM or look at Apple. Now we talked earlier about Google to see how much impact these organizations have, not only at the level of products, but in the case of Apple, at the level of aesthetics and design. What is it? We have an entirely new referent for what design is. What customer satisfaction means in terms of design. It's not try and sell Hewlett Packard. Try and sell a piece of their hardware and put that up against back in the day. I'm not talking about now. I don't want to. But we have a very different expectation about what design means. And we also are having a very different expectation that is happening in real time. We're being reworked in terms of our expectations and our sense of values as a result of, as you mentioned, what's happening at Google and other places. This doesn't go unnoticed. This doesn't happen behind closed doors. This is when companies acknowledge the people that work in those organizations for who they are, for their gifts, for their talents, for their abilities, and when they allow them to shine and they recognize them. Remember this old culture where we had managers in business school? I mean, who wants to be managed? I don't want to be managed.
That's manager's authority. We're talking about manager more as facilitator, coach, leader, really.
Leader. We're talking about leaders. Inspirers. We're talking about inspirers and people who are tasked with absolutely. They have accountabilities, but there's an entirely different way to go about meeting accountabilities and inspiring, and what is the nature of performance? These are very different metrics here.
Yeah, what happens is, I mean, again, Apple, Hewlett Packard has changed because they've had to respond to Apple. And, the other groceries have had to change because they have to respond to Trader Joe's. What happens with, I think of the airlines and the whole baggage thing, because Southwest never went the route of charging for bags. You have two. If you have more than that, we charge you. They don't charge for food. All the other clever boy stuff, that's my experience of it, where, okay, we'll give you this rate and then we'll tack all these extra fees. Here's how we'll, get our money. Southwest didn't play along. I go on Southwest Airlines. There's 3 tiers of payment. You get it really, really early. You get a web fare. But none of them feel extraordinary. Like if you get a last minute fare on one of the other airlines, there's a gouge. There's all these little gouges, all these little ways that I feel objectited.
It's terrible. I was flying home from Vancouver not long ago, and I wanted to make a flight change at the last minute, and it cost $1,000.
Yeah. And so then you lose a customer. When you play that kind of game, you lose a customer. What Southwest has done is they've maintained a level of integrity. It's not that. It's maybe $50 or Southwest or whatever it is. Their policies are so customer friendly and so reliable that I just make a change. I feel so comfortable. If I have to pay full freight on Southwest, I know it's not going to be $1,000.
Funny that you mentioned that. The same time that I met Doug Rauch, I also met Roy Spence. And Roy created the Southwest campaigns and facilitated much of what their mission statement is and their purpose. And he told a story about some young MBA who thought at that point, well, we should do that too. We should also charge for baggage because we're going to lose out. And Roy said, I don't see it that way, and I can't really, I can't really see myself in the same role here if we're going to react to those kinds of pressures. And fortunately, they did not go down that road. But I'm seeing a clock waving here.
Yep.
Okay, it looks like we've run out of clock.
We have. Well, look, we're going to have Doug back. This conversation
we'll have
continues.
Roy back in too as well.
And we'll have Roy in. And so all we invite you to do is keep coming back because we'll be talking about this as we go forward here on Cutting Edge Consciousness.